Kicking off the list today at number 10 is Conan the Barbarian. Conan was born on a carnage-strewn battlefield in the hills of the westernmost region of Chimeria, all the way back in the Hyborian Age, aka around 13 to 10,000 BC. The fact that Conan was born on a battlefield was considered to be an omen that Conan would grow up to be a great warrior one day, and that was not wrong. He was one of the most accomplished swordsmen of the Hyborian Age and is often listed alongside King Arthur, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Zorro as one of the greatest fictional male sword fighters in history, which is a really cool thing to put on a resume. Conan has unusual strength, agility, and speed for a human being. He has lifted immense objects or enemies, even breaking the neck of a raging bull when he was still pretty young. It is said that he has the strength equivalent of about 10 to 20 men, but he has been knocked over by just 2 dudes before, so don't take that as a fact. More often than not, Conan relies upon his lightning-fast reflexes in combat situations, and they very rarely let him down. On top of that, he has a massive level of durability, and through years of dealing with sorcerers, magicians, and witches, he has even developed a moderate level of resistance to magic and mind control spells. Conan is a master warrior. He has a hardy survival instinct, is a master of stealth, and is multilingual. While primarily known as a wandering sellsword, Conan progressively became a master tactician, leading entire armies into battle, and eventually, Conan even became the king of Aquilonia, and also eventually a hero interacting with the heroes of the modern day. In at number 9, it's Red Sonja. If we are talking about Conan the Barbarian, then we need to talk about Red Sonja, because not only is she from the same time period, she's arguably even more capable than Mr. Barbarian himself. Red Sonja lived with her family in a humble home in the western Hyrcanian steppes. I don't know if I pronounced that right, so let me know in the comments down below. When she had just turned 17 years old, a group of mercenaries attacked, taking the lives of her father, Ivor, her mother, and her 2 younger brothers, and burning their house and all their possessions to the ground. Now she survived, but was then horribly mistreated by the leader of that group. Understandably, Sonja raged for some revenge. Answering this, the red goddess Skatok appeared to her and instilled incredible skill in the handling of swords and other weapons under the condition that she would never lay with a man unless he defeated her in combat, which is a weird kind of thing to say, I guess. Going forward as Red Sonja, she honed her skills with the blade and became a sellsword, eventually even slaying the evil wizard Kulan Gath, but he came back. Red Sonja was one of the most powerful and skilled swordsmen in any era, among both men and women. She was also in peak human physical condition, a martial arts expert, and possessed knowledge and experience in fighting the supernatural. And she beat Conan. So, number 8, Hercules. Hercules is the son of Zeus, Skyfather and supreme ruler of the gods of Olympus, and Alcmena, a mortal woman who lived over 3,000 years ago. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, arranged for her father Zeus to have a half-mortal son to be the world's champion. Zeus seduced the mortal queen Alcmena, pretending to be her husband, King Amphitryon. I'm sorry if I pronounced that too. Alcmena gave birth to the baby Hercules, and as an adult demigod in ancient Greece, Hercules achieved worldwide fame as he became the greatest hero of the ancient world, best known for his 12 labors. As the Olympian god of strength as well, Hercules' strength is unlimited, making him one of the strongest and most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe. As an infant, he was breastfed by his stepmother, Hera, queen of the Olympian gods, which increased his already demigod physiology to godlike levels. Hercules possessed the superhuman physical attributes of an Olympian god, but interestingly, some of his powers are actually superior to the vast majority of the other gods. Most recently, he has been a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but he has also been part of the Avengers, the God Squad, Council of Godheads, the Mighty Avengers, the Secret Avengers, the Defenders, the Heroes for Hire, and, of course, S.H.I.E.L.D.
Number 7, Iron Fist. Fan Faye is the Iron Fist of the Stone Age Avengers, also known as the Avengers of 1 million BCE. Fan Faye is actually the reason why the ritual to become the Iron Fist and gain its unique powers was all about fighting Shao Lao in a battle to the death. This wasn't, however, because Kunlun wanted to challenge Fan at the time and believed she should, be their champion. This actually happened as the result of a punishment. Fan Faye, you see, was a kung fu master who had been trained since birth in Kunlun, but her curiosity of the outside world caused her to sort of leave Kunlun in secret. She came across cavemen who were helpless against the beasts that basically often attacked them, and she decided she was going to help them. Fan sought to help these people by teaching and training them herself in the ways of kung fu. However, it was forbidden in Kunlun to share your knowledge, and when her people found out, they marked her as a criminal. As punishment, her students were brought to Shaolao and basically fed to the dragon. Forced to watch, Fan Fei went into a rage, breaking her shackles, seeking to share in the same demise as her students, becoming deeply distraught. However, when she went up against Shaolao, she struck the dragon and her fist went right through, killing it, and coating her fist in its blood, giving her the power to channel her chi into fiery fists, and leaving her with a dragon mark, which marks her as the Iron Fist.
And at 6, Dr. Fate. Nabu the Wise was a lord of order and cosmic being who arrived at Earth billions of years ago to take on a proactive role in battling the Lords of Chaos. A cosmic being with near limitless magical power, his spirit resides in the Helmet of Fate and is the source of the great power held by those who wear the mantle of Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate is just the helmet. Fun fact, you all knew that. Dr. Fate's origins begin over 10 billion years ago, which I personally think qualifies as ancient, or maybe even older than that, if there is anything older than that. I don't know. My senior year Comtech teacher was pretty old. But not long after the formation of the universe, were there born two elemental forces, the Lords of Order and the Lords of Chaos. You can kind of see where this conflict is going. On the world called Celia, the Lords of Order manifested themselves, the first sentient race in the universe, and a race of incorporeal magical beings at that. After millennia, circa 3500 BCE, the Lords of Order descended onto Earth and then became Nabu the Wise, who was also an advisor to the pharaohs of Egypt. He's old, okay? I don't know what else I said 10 billion years. I think that's pretty solid.
Number 5, Conan the Barbarian. That's right, Conan is an ancient superhero who actually also hails from Marvel. Not only that, but he was also an Avenger. Despite technically being a Marvel superhero, Conan is also kind of otherworldly, hailing from the sword and fantasy genre of comics. Although for Marvel, Conan is still labeled as an Earth 616 character, hailing from their main comic book reality. He does, however, come from the Hyborian Age, an old hero from the past. But he was one of the heroes still summoned by Doctor Strange and Elektra when they brought together their own team of savage Avengers to stand against the threat of Kulan Gath. This went down in Jerry Dugan and Adam Gorham's Savage Avengers series, which I still really want to read. It looks super good. It just looks like such a great time. And Conan's presence on the team is definitely part of the reason for my motivation to jump into this series, hopefully in the near future. I have a lot of things to read.
And at 4, Mr. Majestic. I put this here because I like the word majestic, but also this is kind of weird. Mr. Majestic is a Wildstorm comic superhero created by H.K. Prager and Jim Lee. He made his first appearance in Wildcats number 11 as a backup story, but he's known for being the strongest superhero in the Wildstorm universe, and he shares quite a few similarities with Superman. But given that Wildstorm is owned by DC, there shouldn't really be any conflict there. Mr. Majestic is originally from the planet Kara and was known as Magistros, but yeah, this isn't like Superman at all. I don't know what you're talking about. Why are you saying that? He has 2 kids, Kanesha and Magistrate, but there was also an infertility crisis in his homeworld, which resulted in only 1 child per woman. Yeah, so how did this happen? Well, Magistros and Coda warrior Lady Zana, who was also later known as other things, it doesn't matter. They were chosen not to breed, but since Coda warriors became priestesses after giving birth, Zana's mother pretended that Kanesha was stillborn and then claimed to have given birth to her herself. Yeah, so basically Kanesha passed off her daughter as her sister, which is a whole... They're old. It's old. It's an old thing.
Number 3, Starbrand. Vin is the Starbrand in 1 million BCE. He ends up becoming the Starbrand after leaving his tribe. He left them because he believed he did not belong due to the fact that he realized he was gay. Something that seemed to be unacceptable to his people in that time. On his journey, he sought out a garden he had seen in a dream, which it turned out appeared to be the biblical paradise known as the Garden of Eden. Once he found it, he also found Burke. Also no vowels. No vowels for these people in prehistoric times. The 2 men became lovers, but would eventually be separated after Burke died in a deviant attack. It seemed the deviants wanted the garden for themselves. The attack resulted in a cave-in, and while Burke did not survive, Vin did, finding the body of a dinosaur who had previously been the Starbrand. Vin was imbued with its powers and fought against those who had killed Burke. However, in the process, this also destroyed the garden. Vin would go on to become the hero known as Starbrand in his time and join up with the other Stone Age Avengers of 1 million BCE.
But ultimately, in number 2, Doctor Strange Fate. Doctor Strange Fate is the amalgam of Doctor Strange, Charles Xavier, and Dr. Fate. Yeah, they're present in the Amalgam universe of Earth 9602, and given that both the Sorcerer Supreme and Dr. Fate are present, I think that this qualifies as ancient. Dr. Fate alone just makes that happen. Strange Fate learned that 2 keys controlled by Access would restore the DC Comics and Marvel Comics universes to their own worlds, which would result in the destruction of the Amalgam universe and therefore him. So, to keep his universe intact, Dr. Strange Fate recruits Jade Nova, Skulk, and White Witch to capture Access and bring him to Strange Fate so that the Amalgam universe can remain active. But it turns out that he was actually a part of a problem, or a part of the problem. That's a story for another day. But Doctor Strange, yes, the real one, preserved the Amalgam universe in a pocket dimension, essentially making it its own multiverse in a sense. But I also bring this up because I like the Amalgam universe, okay? It's cool. Iron Lantern, Lobo the Duck, hell yeah.
Number 1. Man-Thing's Sorcerer Supreme. Perhaps even more surprising is a reality where the Man-Things rule the planet. Their version of the 1 million BCE Avengers team is filled exclusively with Man-Things as a result. One of these Man-Things is known as the Sorcerer Supreme on this planet in the reality we know as Earth 91. Unfortunately, we do not get to know too much about this version of Man-Thing, as he is killed by the Masters of Evil when they come to his reality in Avengers Forever issue number 5 from 2022. What we do know is that like Dr. Stephen Strange and many other Sorcerer Supremes, this Man-Thing does seem to possess a cape, although it is a bit shorter than Strange's, I would say. His version of the Eye of Agamotto, or his version of the Third Eye, I'm not really sure what's going on with this, also seems to be something that he has, but he wears inside his chest, or on his chest. I think Dr. Strange ends up with a third eye at one point, but he's also got the Eye of Agamotto, so I don't know. Instead of Man-Thing wearing this anywhere else, or having it on a chain or a necklace, implying, that this eye is a part of him. Or perhaps it's simply, like I said, just a third eye, and it's just on the chest. I feel like that wouldn't be, I guess he doesn't really wear it close because he's a Man-Thing, so actually I guess it'd be fine. Number 10, the Question. In the Prime Earth continuity, the Question, or a version of the Question, is revealed to be one of the oldest beings in the world of DC. This is revealed after we learn that the Question was one of the criminals in essence that the Circle of Eternity, located at the Rock of Eternity, chose to punish for their crimes against humanity. This group of beings who were punished were known as the Trinity of Sin. The Question would go on to become a hero following this. This version of the Question is largely a mysterious figure who has not appeared as much, probably because the original version of the character, Vic Sage, and his predecessor, Renee Montoya, ended up both returning to the comics recently. What we do know is that the Question had his memory erased from history and from himself, with even his face being left completely featureless, so he could never remember who he was. This was part of his punishment, but also done to guarantee that the Question would not be able to rise up once more as he had threatened to do originally, since he would no longer be able to remember what exactly he had done and why in the first place. So how can he return if he doesn't even know, why he was doing it in the first place? And apparently, we may never get to know any of this either, unless somebody returns to tell the rest of this version of the Question's tale. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you also love superheroes that are surprisingly old, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9, the Eternals. The Eternals are simply a group of heroes most people don't often think of, which is why I'm including them here. Despite them coming to the MCU, I would still say there are tons out there who have fallen off the MCU bandwagon recently and kind of just weren't particularly compelled to watch this film. So there are still a lot who do not know about the Eternals, which is unfortunate. This is a huge shame, I think, because the Eternals are really a cool group of heroes who have existed for millennia. Initially, their origin was that they were prehistoric humans who were basically modified by celestial tech, turned into their own race of beings. Later on, we'd get an additional bit of information on their origin in terms of kind of how they worked, how they operated, with them being resurrected by the Great Machine on the regular anytime they died. That's how they were eternal, almost being like kind of androids with a soul in a sense at one point. The Great Machine is actually also Earth, which is both a big blue ball that everyone lives on and at its core an actual machine, a resurrection machine in part. Its survival is intrinsic to the survival of Earth and all life forms living on it, and it was, up until recently, also tied to the Eternals, meaning that for Earth to continue, the Eternals would also have to continue to be called into existence. The Eternals, being ancient heroes, were initially the enemies of the deviants who were also created by the Celestials. They defended Earth against the Dark Celestials, or they tried to, and have also become ingrained in human mythology, with them being the real-world heroes from ancient epics and folklore. Hawkgirl. While Hawkman recently appeared in Black Adam in the DCEU, which has been rebranded with their highly anticipated reset impending as simply the DCU, Hawkman isn't the only hero out there who is ancient among the Justice Society. And no, I'm not talking about Dr. Fate, who also is pretty old. In fact, many people probably didn't even know that Hawkman was really even ancient per se. He doesn't look old, that's for sure, but he is, in fact, not in body, but in soul. Hawkman is the reincarnated soul of ancient Egyptian Prince Khufu Qatar. Carter Hall is only the latest in a line of incarnations of the prince in the comics, and his love, Sheara, was also reincarnated as well throughout the years, becoming known as the hero Hawkgirl and also as Hawkwoman. Later, this origin would be retconned, tweaked somewhat, so they'd actually be even older than ancient Egypt, instead becoming ancient aliens from the planet Thanagar, who simply came to Earth. Their original souls in this version of the tale were each believed to belong to Shra and Qatar the Deathbringer, who were both cursed to be reincarnated alongside each other throughout eternity.
Number 7. Earth 6799, 1967 Spider-Man cartoon. Bouncing off that happy little lovely tale, we have Earth 6799, or just Earth 67, which is actually the Earth where the 1967 Spider-Man takes place. Because of that, this Earth technically first appeared in Spider-Man Episode 1 Season 1 on September 9th, 1967. Its comic book appearance first comes in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, Number 9, as one of the many alternate Spider-Man featured in this story. He also shows up in Spider-Verse Team-Up Issue Number 2 when Miles Morales and Peter Parker come to this Earth to find Spider-Man and recruit him to the fight against the Inheritors. It's super entertaining. Number 6. Earth 84243, Conan in the modern day's 70s. Some people may not know this, but Conan the Barbarian is actually part of Marvel Comics. And while the era he lived in, the Hyborian Age, is part of the 616 continuity, the What If story on Earth 79213 isn't. Instead of being in the Hyborian Age though, our boy Conan gets stuck in the 20th century. After visiting the Hyborian trade city of Akbitana, he is captured by a wizard who specializes in time travel. And instead of escaping, he is transported to Manhattan on July 13th, 1977. What does he decide to do with himself? Well, after scaring off some punks and throwing an old lady in a trash can, he has a romantic encounter with a modern age lady, Danette, who shows him the Guggenheim Museum, which reminds him of an ancient citadel, and they go to investigate. Here, he fights off some muggers and then gets struck by magical lightning that transports him back through time to his Hyborian age. But at least he got to keep Danette's cap as a reminder of their romance. Number 5. Earth 15513, 1872. Technically, Earth 15513 is Battleworld, which is actually part of the modern Secret Wars story. The pocket dimension of the Valley of Doom is made of another Earth's version of the Wild West, mainly the town of Timely. Timely is run by its mayor, Wilson Fisk, and his enforcers, who ultimately answer to Governor Roxxon. Stephen Rogers is the sheriff in this here town, and he's a bitter but just man after the death of his deputy, Bucky Barnes. Anthony Stark is the town drunk, regretful of how his weapons were used in the Civil War. Natasha Romanoff is the widow of Bucky, with Bruce Banner being the doctor of the town. The new hero, Red Wolf, tries blowing up the Roxxon Dam, which almost results in his lynching, if it weren't for Sheriff Stephen Rogers, who saves him. Conflict blossoms when the agents of Roxxon, Bullseye, Grizzly, Elektra, and Dr. Octopus arrive in town and start running amok. Another story you have to read. I promise the steampunk-looking Iron Man will not disappoint you. Number 4. Earth 717, Captain America in the Civil War. The What If stories are so cool. In What If Captain America, Stephen Rogers actually fought in the American Civil War instead of World War II as General America, given powers from an ancient Native American eagle that also turned an evil racist Bucky Barnes into the White Skull, who became the leader of a white supremacist group. Because of General America's involvement in the Civil War, The Union won the war a year earlier than it normally would have. Abraham Lincoln survived his second term in office. He helped rebuild the South, suppressed the rise of a certain group of hooded racists, and prevented the Indian Wars from ever happening. He would go on to fight the White Skull and his new, deadlier hate group, eventually being succeeded by a line of Captain Americas who were his descendants. Well, hey there, time traveler. You're from the time period where YouTube still lets you like and subscribe, right? Well, if you're enjoying this video right here, why don't you just go and hit that thumbs up? It sure helps us out a lot. Alrighty, let's get on to the top 3. Number 3, Earth 90214, Marvel Noir. In this alternate version of Earth, superheroes debuted in the 1920s and 30s instead of their normal timing. This Earth 90214 brought us Marvel Noir, with subsequent noir versions of Punisher, Wolverine, Iron Man, Daredevil, Luke Cage, the X-Men, and most famously, Spider-Man. Each story is a fresh, unique, and awesome take on each character, seeing how superpowers in this world are pretty much non-existent except for a few characters. For example, Spider-Man was bitten by a spider, but instead of being based in science, his powers derived from a spider god. Or Wolverine didn't actually have claws, he just carries like brass knuckle blade things. Another example would be the X-Men, who are actually a group of sociopathic criminals, led by an Xavier who believed sociopathy was the future of the human species, which is just incredible. Number 2, Earth 811, Days of Future Past. Earth 811 is a future timeline where Sentinels rule over North America. After their creation, almost all mutants have been hunted and exterminated. The mutants that were not killed are kept in concentration camps. Even the heroes who aren't mutants have been exterminated. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Daredevil, they're all gone. But hey, this is the future, not the past. Yeah, I'm getting there, okay? Rachel Summers, the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, uses her telepathic powers to send Kitty Pryde's mind back into her younger self's body. Specifically, Kitty's mind went all the way back to the Halloween of 1980, where she informed the X-Men of what their future could become, and they prevented the assassination of Robert Kelly. The story is a whole lot more complex than that, and is also one of the most prized Marvel stories, so give it a read! Number 1, Earth 311, Marvel 1602. Okay, Marvel 1602 is my absolute favorite Marvel alternate universe. Fun fact, it was the first Marvel writing escapade for superstar fantasy writer Neil Gaiman. The universe actually got its start in a different alternate reality, Earth 460, where Purple Man became president for life. Most heroes had been hunted down or had died from old age, but after Captain America is captured, he is banished away to Earth 616's 1599, shortly before Roanoke was formed, which inadvertently created Earth 311. For some reason, the presence of Captain America destabilized reality and began the emergence of heroes and villains into this world who are counterparts to many of the present-day heroes and villains of the Marvel Universe. Count Otto von Doom the Handsome, Witchbreed, which are mutants, Grand Inquisitor Enrique, which is Magneto, Carlos Xavier, which is Charles Xavier, Four from the Fantastic, Sir Nicholas Fury, Peter Parquois, David Banner. The story is so interesting, intertwining actual history with superpowered beings. I highly recommend you give it a read if you haven't already. Number 10, The Immortal. With a name like The Immortal, you bet your socks this guy has been around for a hot minute. Due to an accident that happened approximately 3,000 years ago, the man who became the Immortal was exposed to an unknown anomaly that gave him superhuman abilities that put him almost on par with Viltrumites, making him one of the 3 known beings in the universe that can make that claim. But outside of his incredible strength, speed, durability, stamina, and flight powers, the Immortal is, you guessed it, immortal. Able to regenerate at an insanely fast rate, regrowing limbs and organs, not needing food, water, or oxygen to survive, and being immune to all poisons, toxins, venoms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, and allergens. However, funnily enough, there is a way to, quote, kill him. If the Immortal's head is separated from his torso, it needs to be manually reattached for his healing factor to activate. But Despite that, even when they aren't attached, he still remains perfectly preserved until the reattachment happens. He's been around for so long that he's been a knight possibly under King Arthur as Lancelot, an explorer under or possibly as Christopher Columbus in the Spanish Armada. He fought in the American Revolution, became president of the United States by taking the alias of this guy Abraham Lincoln you might have heard of, and he fought as a soldier in the First World War. In the 1930s is when he officially became a superhero and more recently became a member of the Guardians of the Globe.
And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button? Hey. Number 9, The Darkness. The story featuring this host of The Darkness is so vicious and bloody, but also just so raw and emotional. I love it personally. While many think of a Jackie Estacado when they think of The Darkness, he is not the only host The Darkness entity has ever had, which honestly, if you're familiar with the story of Jackie, you probably also kind of know that because, you know, it gets passed down. In fact, there were many who came before Jackie. Case in point, Estacado, the Darkness host who is a leader of a Visigoth tribe during the final days of the ancient Roman Empire, circa 410 BC, after its downfall had really already begun, and some would say even kind of already concluded, I guess. Estacado is a known rebel against the Roman Empire, and a powerful one at that, wielding the Darkness in his fight against the last standing Roman legions. He ends up going head to head with Legatus and his legion after already dying and being resurrected by the Darkness twice. While he offers Legatus a chance to surrender, Legatus knows he is doomed either way since the Roman Empire is coming to an end, and so chooses not to back down as he doesn't really see surrendering as a real option given the punishment for doing so, were they even able to make it back home at this point. As such, Legatus's legion falls and Estacado makes plans to march with his tribe to Rome.
Number 8, Ogon Bat. Okay, Ogon Bat is a unique and cool character in his own right, but he was also one of the world's first superheroes ever, even technically coming before Superman. Originating from Japan as the god of justice and protector of the weak, his origin is that he was originally an Atlantean who was sent forward in time 10,000 years to defend the modern world from evil. He wields a scepter that fires bolts of energy, causes mini earthquakes, and slices through steel. He himself was immortal, could fly, breathe underwater, had X-ray vision, and possessed superhuman strength, speed, and invulnerability to bullets and lasers. He was summoned by a little girl who would call on him, causing a sparkle to appear around, which then turned into a bat and then turned into the hero when it found its enemy. It's very weird, but we just roll with it. While he initially started as a comic, he also has a TV show that appeared in several different countries outside of Japan, and I think he looks really cool. So, yeah.
Number 7, V. V comes to us from Alan Moore and David Lloyd's series V for Vendetta. He's a mysterious character who is also known as Patient Number 5, who is said to be one of the many victims of abuse in a resettlement camp run by the fascist and villainous Norse-Fire-ruled government. It is believed that V was a test subject at the camp who escaped. He then adopted the mantle V and began to work on building an anarchistic uprising to topple the oppressive regime. His methods were meant to appear morally ambiguous so that readers could decide how to see him, as a hero or as a madman. V made his first appearance in the series Warrior in issue number 1. Also, if you haven't checked out that little story that he's in Warrior, V for Vendetta, it's really great. Just saying. Also, the series is great. Number 6, Black Cat. Black Cat was first introduced in The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, Issue 194 as a thief, and she continued to be that for quite a while. But she was also introduced as a love interest for Spider-Man at the same time, which she would also continue to be for some time. Distracting Spidey with a kiss, she was able to get away with the goods she needed and succeeded in breaking her dad out of jail as a result. Though we wouldn't learn her dad's connection to her until the next issue. Being a mysterious figure with self-serving motives has always left her painted as an anti-hero, even when she has heroic intentions at heart. Although Felicia Hardy has played both sides before as well, being a full-on hero and a full-on criminal at times. Number 5, Punisher. Probably one of the most iconic when it comes to the idea of what an anti-hero is. Frank Castle was also one of the first. It's likely because of him as well that the idea of seeking revenge became a somewhat dark one. The Punisher's main quest is to get vengeance, not just for himself, but for others whom he thinks deserve it. Originally, he turned to a life of vigilantism after the death of his family, who happened to be on a picnic at the wrong place, the wrong time, and were witnesses to something they shouldn't have been. As such, they were eliminated by the mob. Despite also being shot, Frank survived the attack, though the rest of his family died, and as a result, he swore revenge. He's also known for being an overly violent hero who fights with guns, which is something most heroes look down upon, preferring to use non-lethal force. The Punisher would achieve next-level anti-hero status when he also became the first anti-hero to kill the entire Marvel Universe in 1995, in Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe, paving the way for another popular anti-hero, Deadpool, to also do so years later. Of course, it would take Deadpool until the 2000s before that would even be a thing for him. The 2010s, as it were, actually. Number 4. Wolverine. Logan, being considered a little more rough around the edges and animalistic, is what quickly granted him an anti-hero status. As far as superheroes go, he was different. He made his first full appearance in The Incredible Hulk Volume 1 Issue 181. Since the beginning, his violent nature and broodiness has made him both well-loved by fans, but sometimes disliked by other heroes. He also has less hang-ups when it comes to killing people, even suggesting at times that it's the best course of action when dealing with villains, and having a pretty big thing for mercy killing when it comes to other heroes. This has also made Logan one of the biggest anti-heroes in the X-Men world. He just kills tons of people. People will be like, I think I'm gonna die, and he's like, I got you, don't worry. I'll make it quick. Number 3. Magneto. Magneto has been known as the foil to X-Men's Professor Xavier for years. Xavier was also the leader of the X-Men, while Magneto was the leader of the first Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, who were often the X-Men's enemies. Still, Magneto does what he does often to make the life of mutants better, albeit through punishing humanity, which, you know, not so great. And while he has spent a lot of time being a villain, over the years he has definitely shifted more to anti-hero, especially in the new Dawn of X mutant relaunch, where he often works alongside Charles. Although Charles is always like, calm down, man. And he's like, no! I will slightly overreact, because I'm Magneto, and that's what I do. Number 2. Catwoman. Catwoman has always operated more on the edge of what's right and wrong since her introduction, which is part of the huge appeal when it comes to her, and has been part of a huge problem in regards to her on and off again relationship with Batman. Though Batman wasn't really a saint either when it came to his early days, but anyways. When Catwoman first appeared in Batman Volume 1 Issue Number 1, it was as a jewel thief, and Batman at the time was engaged to a woman named Julie. Still, he was tempted to join her and become her king of crime, but when he refused her, she managed to escape his clutches, sneaking away. Batman really hoped that he'd run into her again despite her criminal tendencies, and despite the fact that he was engaged, and his wish would eventually be granted. Catwoman would even team up with Batman and join him in his acts of heroism, though originally it would often be for her own motives alone, but she became more of a hero as time went on. Number 1. Namor. Namor is an interesting one. When he first debuted in Motion Picture Funnies Weekly, it was as a young prince attacking land dwellers, seeking revenge for his people. He would then go on to join the fight in World War II, fighting against Nazis with heroes such as Captain America. Later, he would forget who he was and only regain his memories when he was accidentally knocked into the ocean in the original Fantastic Four series by Johnny Storm. He would then rediscover who he was, and that the kingdom that had been his underwater home had been destroyed by the Humans War's nuclear bomb tests, and as a result would attack the land, becoming a villain. Again. Since then, he has done a variety of good and not always so good things, but what remains constant is that Namor's methods have pretty much always been questionable. His return to being good, but in his own way, and still while thinking very highly of himself, made him an anti-hero. And while he is very passionate about protecting his people, there is no doubt that this means he would also do anything to safeguard Atlantis, regardless of how morally ambiguous or severe it might be. Number 10. Black Panther. The leader of Wakanda made his first comic book debut appearance in Fantastic Four Issue 52 in 1966. He is often credited with being the first black superhero to appear in comics. The only sad thing is that it took us that long to get one. The 60s! Such a long time in comics, so long. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. The first story involving him in the pages of Fantastic Four Volume 1 are pretty hilarious and great. If you haven't read them, you kind of should. They're interesting. Black Panther invites the Fantastic Four to Wakanda. Naive as they are, they accept. But what they don't know is that Black Panther longs to fight them. Of course, while the comic originally seems to be spinning Black Panther as a villain, it is later revealed that he only wanted to test them, and the fighting was merely to prove their merit as he needs their help. In the next issue, Issue 53, we learn more about his backstory and why he has sought out the Fantastic Four. We are also introduced even more to the land of Wakanda with its unique combination of new age tech and tradition, old and new. So there you have it. Number 9. Green Lantern. Before Hal Jordan or Guy Gardner, there was Alan Scott. He was the first Green Lantern and was created by Martin Odell, making making his comic book debut in All-American Comics issue 16. When this first Green Lantern made his appearance, he probably seemed to be pretty cool, I'm sure. This was way back when the Green Lantern was still an actual lantern, by the way. It's just this lantern he was carrying around. But in retrospect, Alan Scott is known as being one of the silliest Green Lanterns, because he has one of the strangest weaknesses in comic book history. Wood. While there definitely wouldn't be openly gay superheroes for some time yet since he was introduced in 1940, I like to think the fact that he is helpless against wood might pose a double or symbolic meaning. I'll just let you ponder what you will about that. But that's just me. Either way, the weakness is a hilarious one to see in comics, just villains beating him with wooden clubs and baseball bats, and it would later be fully explained and made semi-logical later on, but still, it's ridiculous. And I love it. Number 8. Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger originally started appearing in a comic strip and would later receive his own comic book series in 1948, which went for over 100 issues. Before he was even in comics though, Lone Ranger was a superhero recognized for his radio show, which debuted in the early 1930s. The first few comics consist of compilations of his comic strips, but new stories began with Lone Ranger starting with issue 38, which saw Paul S. Newman writing and Tom Gill on art. The Lone Ranger was known as a mysterious masked Texan Ranger who would fight bandits and outlaws in the Wild West of America, with his loyal pal Tonto and his trusty steed Silver. Hi-ho Silver away!
Okay, at number 7 we've got Marvel's Dominic Fortune, or Dominic Fortunov. This character is not only old in terms of his first appearance in the comics, but the character himself is aged to the point where it's known to be one of his biggest weaknesses. First appearing in Marvel Preview number 2 in 1975, this superhero needs a comeback for the sole reason that he's just a guy. He doesn't have any powers, but fought in World War II and always seems to be getting caught up in assassination attempts and weird odd jobs, like one time when he had to babysit 3 drunken actors in Hollywood for a weekend and had to call the cops on them after things got out of hand. And after that, Fortune actually gets recruited to the Avengers by Nick Fury in 1959. He's just a good old-fashioned human superhero who runs into human troubles and stays in his lane, but ends up getting the opportunity still to support the superpowered Avengers with bazooka blasts and covert ops. At number 6, we have DC's Dr. Fate. This guy is old. He first appeared in More Fun Comics number 55 in 1940 and basically hasn't been mentioned again since his death in the Book of Fate number 1 in 1997. So yes, that's a long run, but still I'd like to see more of him. Dr. Fate is a superhero that's got so much going on and looks so cool that I don't know why he isn't used more often these days. His powers come from an incident when he, Kent Nelson, and his father were uncovering the tomb of ancient immortal Nabu, and Kent is basically trained by the ancient being and awarded with the Amulet of Nabu, a cloak, and a helmet. With the training and these items in his control, he has abilities ranging from magic manipulation and flight to invisibility, super strength, and resurrection, among others. It's just a really cool character based on real ancient myth, and I don't see any reason why Dr. Fate shouldn't have another comeback soon. Okay, number 5, Marvel's Gargoyle. This superhero first appeared in Defenders issue number 94 in 1981, but since then he's actually retired and settled down in Greenwich Village. He even opened a restaurant called Isaac's Oysters. But he did go for one more rip for old time's sake, aiding Iron Man on a mission to take down the android Korvac. But that's sort of been it for him. And what's cool about this superhero is that he was sort of meant to be evil, but just chose good. He was formed when Isaac Christians agreed to place his soul inside a cursed gargoyle and do the bidding of the six-fingered hand. This was all in exchange for his issues to be resolved. But then, when he was tasked with capturing Hellcat, a member of the Defenders, he couldn't get himself to do it and defied the six-finger hand, and just sort of kept living on as this possessed gargoyle who chose good. He kind of reminds me of Beast. He just has this super wholesome energy to him, and I just feel like he could do for more of that sweet, sweet limelight. At number 4, we have Zeta from Batman Beyond, and eventually the Zeta Project cartoon spinoff. The show ran from 2001 to 2002 as part of a spinoff to the Batman Beyond episode Zeta. This character is so wholesome and doesn't get enough attention, having been last seen 20 years ago in what would have been the final episode of the short-running series. This synthoid was built for the NSA to keep an eye on terrorist organizations, so his abilities are pretty extensive, being able to shapeshift into just about anyone to infiltrate infiltrate and carry out covert ops with ease. He's a naive and friendly character who decides to go rogue after realizing that any one of his assassination targets could be innocent. Zeta had such a moment and clearly a huge approval rating since his one episode got him a whole series, but at a certain point, the world forgot about such a good and powerful synthoid superhero that definitely deserves a comeback. At number 3, there's Warlord, a character the world hasn't seen since his death in Warlord Volume 4, Issue 12. But there should be some kind of revival of Travis Morgan, who is another character on the list who doesn't actually have any powers, but is just a very well-respected and decorated war veteran. He also looks a lot like Oliver Queen or Green Arrow, which could have had something to do with it. They sort of acknowledge this when they finally meet in the same comic, and all of the Seattle underworld mistake Warlord for Green Arrow and attack him on sight. But whatever the reason is, Warlord's legacy deserves to be acknowledged with another appearance of some kind. I mean, the lore behind the character is that in past lives he's been Sir Lancelot, D'Artagnan of the Three Musketeers, and Crazy Horse among other legendary warriors and soldiers. He's just a great human character with, might I add, a really cool costume and some badass accolades to boot. Bring him back. Okay, at number 2 on the list we've got Komodo. This superhero really was a flash in the pan, only appearing on and off for a few years and having her legacy end with her powers being stripped. For a time, until they're restored again by Cloud9 and Hardball, but that's sort of it. And I think the last time she's been seen is in the Fear Itself storyline, which wrapped up in 2011, which is 11 years ago now, believe it or not. But this character needs to reappear in some way. The superhero was first created because Melody Kusama lost her leg in a serious car accident, and none other than Dr. Connors from, yes, the Spider-Man series, decides to endow her with the regenerative powers of a lizard. Well, not only that, of course, she actually turns into a lizard fully and at will and gains super strength, speed, agility, stamina, all that good stuff. I think this story is a good one to retell because who doesn't love a good story where someone confined to a wheelchair is able to not only walk again, but fight crime and be pretty damn good at it. Okay, last on the list is just my personal favorite, arguably obscure superhero 3D Man. An athlete turned superhero, 3D Man mysteriously gains superpowers after being stripped of his 3 Olympic gold medals. I mean, he was taking steroids, but there's always room for redemption, right? This character first appeared in 1998 and no one ever really talks about him. And to be honest, I didn't even know he existed until I started writing this list. And I want this hero to get more spotlight primarily because I'm a sucker for early 2000s culture, and this character is just such a great time capsule for that period, where everybody was obsessed with 3D for some reason, with DVDs coming with 3D glasses in the case, remember that? And 3D Man has the same nostalgic look to him, with many of his appearances being colored in green and red. If you want to look him up yourself, you'll notice that he originally went by the name of Triathlon and later changed to 3D Man during the Secret Invasion storyline. This guy just looks so cool and hits home with some good nostalgia for me, as well as probably anyone from the Gen Z or millennial generations. And there's also just a silly factor there too. 3D Man needs to come back. Please, can we? Just for 1 second.
Number 10, Helena Wayne as Huntress. Before Helena Bertinelli was Huntress, we had Helena Wayne. Helena Wayne was the daughter of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle, Batman and Catwoman respectively. Although she didn't come from a crime family, she was still heavily trained by her parents, and eventually took up the mantle Huntress as a vigilante. Like the main continuity Huntress, she was also known for being more violent than was considered acceptable. After her mother's death, she moved out and blaming the criminal Silky Cernak for her mother's death, as he had blackmailed Selina into returning to a life of crime as Catwoman, Helena Wayne set out for revenge. Catwoman died when she returned to her life of crime. No. Mom, why? Number 9, Venom. Venom would technically make its first appearance in issue 252 of volume 1 of the Amazing Spider-Man series, but it wouldn't be until almost 50 issues later in issue 299 that the suit would develop a mind of its own, or well, bind its own mind with that of Eddie Brock's mind, and be introduced to us again as Venom. Once Eddie had got his hands on the suit, he began to plot sweet, sweet revenge on Peter Parker. But during his first appearance, Peter, who was also rocking a black and white suit at the time, albeit not the symbiotic one, I know, confusing, was not at home, so instead Venom ran into MJ in her and Peter's apartment, scaring her senseless. Eddie would go on to terrorize Peter, but the two would at times reluctantly team up to take on even bigger bads, as despite being kind of a bad guy, Eddie had sort of a moral code. He definitely didn't like to kill innocent civilians and tried to avoid that when possible, though also he sometimes did that. The two teamed up to take on villains like Carnage, and eventually Eddie would become a hero in his own right. He's probably got one of the best story arcs in comics because of his gradual transformation since his introduction as Venom in '88 from complete villain to, well, complete anti-hero. Maybe even like full-on hero now. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is Venom a full hero yet? Can we go there? Number 8. John Constantine. Constantine made his first appearance in Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 37. He is known as an occult detective from England who likes to do things his own way. He's somewhat violent and reckless, with somewhat of a disregard for the smaller things. To John, sometimes you have to break a few eggs or sacrifice a few souls to make an omelet. And as long as it's for the greater good, he's sometimes fine with that. In his own series Hellblazer, which started in 1988 and ran for over 300 issues, the original tone of the series was quite dark because the series also came out as part of DC's Vertigo line, which was known for being one of the darkest imprints that DC ever had. Of course, sadly, Vertigo is no more, but in its place we now have the stunning DC Black Label, so I guess it's fine. Just kidding. DC Black Label's really awesome. But still, can't we have both? Can't we have both DC? Number 7. Tonto. You didn't think I was going to talk about Lone Ranger and just like leave Tonto out of this list, did you? Tonto was originally shown as Lone Ranger's native partner and was part of the Comanche tribe originally. Some may think of him as just a sidekick, but as time progressed, his character tended to be more presented as an equal and partner to the Lone Ranger rather than just a sidekick. He got his own comic book spin-off series in the 50s titled The Lone Ranger's Companion Tonto, and was often depicted as being witty and sarcastic, even going on to mock other less favorable portrayals of himself in pop culture that made him seem more savage. I like when heroic characters are self-aware and sassy like that. I feel it. Deadpool, She-Hulk, Tonto. Keep being sassy, keep being witty. Number 6. Superman. Superman is that hero that you usually think of when someone asks who the oldest superhero is during a trivia night. And honestly, I'm sure it's an acceptable answer by most trivia standards. But not here. Not here. Here we go further. Superman is widely thought of as being one of the oldest, the original American comic book superhero. But seeing as how he is number 6 on this list, I think us mega nerds would likely know otherwise. Still, he came out in 1938 and first debuted in Action Comics number 1. And honestly, if you read his original appearance, it's easy to see what all the hullabaloo is about. It's basically a piece created to show off and introduce just how unstoppable Superman is. In fact, Superman would continue to be presented as near invincible until the 80s, acquiring more and more powers with each appearance. And then we had to fix that. We had to tweak that because it's too much power. Superman was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Number 5. Sheena. Queen of the Jungle. You might be wondering just where Wonder Woman is on this list, but Sheena actually predates Wonder Woman, and her own self-titled series even predates Wonder Woman's by a few months. She was originally published by Fiction Comics and was known as Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. Most 1930s Queen of the Jungle I have ever seen, but yet. Sheena's abilities included super strength and agility, and the ability to communicate with animals. She made her first appearance in Wag Comics issue number 1, and her self-titled series came out in early 1942, just a few months before Wonder Woman. Only a few months. So close, so close. Number 4. Kazar. Kazar is known as being one of the first Marvel superheroes. Can you guess who the other one is? Let me know in the comments. But there are actually 2 Kazars. The one I'm referring to here is David Rand. He appeared in Marvel before they were even known as Marvel back when they were Timely Comics in 1936. Kazar shared many similarities with Tarzan and was very passionate about protecting the surrounding wildlife and animals where he grew up. He also fought against Germany with the Allies in World War II, fun fact. In fact, the last story we have of him shows him setting out to provide more wartime aid. The other Kazar we would meet later in the 60s was known as Kevin Reginald, and was the son of the man who discovered Savage Land. Both Kazars also appear to be English. They had an English heritage anyways. Interesting. Number 3. The Phantom. The Phantom originated in comic strip form where so many superheroes were originally born. He was created by Lee Falk. The Phantom actually introduced the idea of a costumed adventurer to American comic books. Before that, we didn't really have people in like tight spandex running around. While the Phantom, aka Kit Walker, found popularity in comic strips in the US, his comics didn't quite shine so bright. Internationally, however, the character seemed to do much better, becoming a hit in Australia, Sweden, and Papua New Guinea. He also was originally from a fictional country in Africa, so no wonder he did well in Papua New Guinea. I feel like they were like, I can see some similarities here. Number 2. Buck Rogers. Buck Rogers first appeared in a comic strip. He is a hero who comes from a world of sci-fi set in the future of the 2400s. 24,000s? 2400s, yeah, 2400s. Depending on what medium or comic you're reading, the last 2 digits of that year are also apt to change for his story. He made his comic strip debut as Buck, but the character was originally named Anthony Rogers in the novel that inspired the comics, Armageddon 2419 AD, written by Philip Francis Nolan. The story follows the adventures of a young man who is frozen for almost 500 years in suspended animation before waking up in the future and rediscovering the world he once knew, in a time that he is less familiar with. Honestly, if you aren't aware of Buck Rogers, but you are a fan of cosmic superheroes or sci-fi and weird space adventures, I highly recommend you check this classic out. Also, if you just like some time travel-y stuff. Who doesn't like time travel-y stuff? Everyone is like me, I hate it, but there's a few of us I know that like it. Number 1. Spring-Heeled Jack. Spring-Heeled Jack was originally a character in English folklore and urban legends. His being was reportedly cited all over Great Britain in the 1830s, and the stories involving him inspired writers to use him as a character in both a play and in Penny Dreadful novels, which were short serials, the original comic books really of the time. He has since seen other comic book series dedicated to him as time has progressed. Spring-Heeled Jack was originally described as a gentlemanly looking demon, and later described as looking like the devil himself, complete with horns. He was often known for breathing fire. Whoa, scary stuff. While his character was originally posed as a villain, he later developed into a misunderstood hero, a nobleman who sought to steal from the rich and give to the poor, complete with his own gadgets to help him perform his noble feats. Kinda like Robin Hood meets Batman. It's kinda what he was doing. Meets a guy that looks like a demon. Just combine all those, you got Spring-Heeled Jack.
Number 10. Avengers 1 million BC, Earth 616. Alright, look. I promise this is the only Earth 616 story I'm mentioning, but given the team and the story, how can I not? The Avengers of 1 million BC came together in the prehistoric era to face Zagreb the Aspirant, basically a mad celestial. The team was made up of Odin Borson, wielding Mjolnir, the mutant Firehair, the avatar of the Phoenix Force, the sorcerer Agamotto, like the Eye of Agamotto, that guy, Fan Fei the Iron Fist, the first ever Black Panther of the Panther tribe, a mammoth riding Ghost Rider, and Starbrand. They first appeared in Marvel Legacy #1 in 2017, and I'm not even going to explain the rest. Just go read it, please! Earth 76611, alternate history. In Fantastic Four Annual number 11 in 1976, Power Man knocked a vibranium cylinder into Mr. Fantastic's time platform, sending it back in time. The cylinder was split in 2 halves. The important to this topic half landed in occupied France in 1942 and created an alternate branching timeline, Earth 76611. In this alternate timeline, the socialist Germans used the vibranium to advance their war effort, successfully invading England in 1943 and even making it to Manhattan by 1944, taking over America by 1946. That's what half a cylinder of vibranium can do, apparently. The Fantastic Four realized what happened though, and through some confusing tomfoolery, they managed to prevent this timeline from replacing the Earth 616 timeline. Number 8. Earth 9591, Ruins. This alternate reality is going to be the most recent one, taking place in the 90s. The timing of this one doesn't factor so much into its story though, as the more relevant detail is that this is the universe where literally everything goes wrong. The entire Fantastic Four, except Ben Grimm, who was replaced by Victor Von Doom, died on their test flight. The X-Men are held in a prison in Texas where they are horribly disfigured to stop them from using their powers. Peter Parker's spider bite caused an infectious rash that mutated his entire body and caused his hair to fall out. Bruce Banner becomes a monstrous mass of tumors. The Avengers all died in a rebellion. The Silver Surfer went mad, wanting to know what it was like to breathe air again. Nick Fury became a cannibal. All sort of that really lovely stuff, you know? I would not read this story unless you're okay with being upset, but I would read this story because it's good and it's interesting. Coming in at number 7 today is Dream. The Endless, featured in DC's Sandman story, are a group of 7 siblings. Death, destiny, despair, desire, delirium, destruction, and the focus of our point today, Dream. These siblings represent fundamental aspects and forces of the Vertigo/DC universe, and are all immortal ageless, and pretty much nigh omnipotent. The parents of the Endless were revealed to be Time, the embodiment of all time itself, father of the Endless, and Night, the embodiment of the infinite darkness that existed before the dawn of the universe, and mother of the Endless. So it's safe to say that these beings are probably pretty ancient, like 10 billion years old ancient. As for Dream himself, or Morpheus, he isn't so much a superhero as we are used to, but he is an extremely powerful, reluctant hero is what I would say, and his journey to that status from emotionless god to a being displaying very human-like emotions and characteristics is the fundamental story of the Sandman itself. Dream dwells in a realm called the Dreaming, from where he controls the fundamental concept of fantasy and reality in the universe, as the line between the waking world and the dream world is quite thin. Coming in at number 6, it's Odin. While the god of thunder Thor almost made this list, his father was and sometimes is still a hero, and he is much older than his son, as you might be able to guess, because father and son relationships be like that. While Marvel plays a little fast and loose with Thor's age, it most recently has been said to be roughly 4,000 years old, but his daddy? Marvel Comics changed Odin's age a few times for the sake of stories, but we can assume that Odin is quite old, far more than 1,000,000 years, as Odin was part of the Avengers of 1 million BC, and by that time, he was seemingly in his prime like Thor is now. So yes, the Allfather, creator of Asgard and ruler of the Norse pantheon of gods, is pretty damn old. Who would have thought? Not me. But he is certainly no pushover. Being the protector of the 10 realms, he is the strongest and wisest of all Asgardians. In his physical prime, he could lift 90 tons, but that number can be boosted up a whole lot to a whole other level thanks to Odin's ability to tap into the Odin Force, which has allowed him to headbutt Galactus into unconsciousness, which is really impressive. As an example of the power he wields, Odin had a fight with Seth, another god, which was waged on several planes of existence simultaneously and felt across infinite planes of reality. The energy released from their battle was so powerful, it shattered entire galaxies, reignited dying suns, and ripped the fabric of the multiverse itself. So, yeah. He's pretty nuts. Number 5, the Immortal. Due to an accident that happened approximately 3,000 years ago in the Image Comics Invincible universe, the man who became the Immortal was exposed to an unknown anomaly that gave him superhuman abilities that put him almost on par with Viltrumites. Outside of his incredible strength, speed, durability, stamina, and flight powers, the Immortal is, you guessed it, immortal. Oh. Able to regenerate at an insanely fast rate, regrowing limbs and organs, not needing food, water, or oxygen to survive, and being immune to all poisons, toxins, venoms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, and allergens. However, funnily enough, there is a way to, quote, kill him. If the Immortal's head is separated from his torso, it needs to be manually reattached for his healing factor to finally kick in. But despite that, even when they aren't attached, he still remains perfectly preserved until the reattachment happens. He's been around for so long that he has been a knight, possibly under King Arthur, an explorer connected to Christopher Columbus in the Spanish Armada. He fought in the American Revolution, became President of the United States by taking the alias of Abraham Lincoln, became President of the United States by taking the alias of someone you may know, Abraham Lincoln, and he fought as a soldier in the First World War. In the 1930s is when he finally officially became a superhero, and more recently became a member of the Guardians of the Globe. Coming in at number 4, Exodus. Grand Duke Benny du Paris was a 12th century nobleman from medieval France, so he is probably one of the youngest people to make this list. As an adult, Bennett was a crusader for the Knights Templar sent to Jerusalem during the Crusades, and he even became best friends with Eobar Garrington, the Black Knight of that era. The two had set out on a quest to find the Tower of Power, when his abilities manifested after an encounter with the Phoenix Force. This granted Bennett some pretty powerful telepathic powers, but pretty quickly, these powers were then improved upon thanks to the mutant Apocalypse, and his ability to augment other individuals. Unfortunately, Apocalypse also caused Exodus to be trapped in a tomb until the modern day when he was awoken by Magneto and joined his cause, which you think would make him a villain, but he has become more of a hero as time has gone on. Exodus is one of the most powerful psionic mutants in existence, with such a pristine use of telekinesis and telepathy that he can even alter electrons and molecules. His power is so strong that Marvel even had to debuff him by making his powers dependent on his or others' level of faith in him. Still, Pretty powerful though. Number 3, the Eternals. Way back in the day, the Celestials came to Earth when proto-humans began to emerge, meaning around 2 to 5 million years ago. That's a long freaking time. The Celestial first host performed genetic experiments on those early humans, resulting in 3 groups. The Immortal and Superior Eternals, the pretty grotesque and monstrous deviants, and just plain Jane regular humans. The Eternals, aka Homo Immortalis, were basically created to defend the planet Earth, specifically from the deviants and to serve Celestials. They became somewhat silent defenders of Homo sapiens, that's us, secluding themselves and rarely directly engaging with us. They built super impressive cities like Olympia, Titanos, Oceania, and Polaria, and their names have become intertwined with heroes throughout ancient history, like Gilgamesh. They are all incredibly powerful and they are all immortal, being reborn if they ever actually are defeated. An average Eternal is intertwined with cosmic energy and can lift about 15 tons without using any form of telekinesis, but a few are able to lift up to 100 tons. Other Eternals specialize in different powers like telepathy and telekinesis, and all Eternals have the ability to join with one another to form the Unimind, made of light, mind, and pure energy. And I haven't even talked about the massive Eternals called the Hex, and I'm not going to, because we're moving on. Coming in at number 2, Eternal Warrior. Gilad Anipada from Valiant Comics was ancient before the rise of the Pharaohs, and apparently will also survive the fall of nations yet to come. Gilad, also known as the Eternal Warrior, is the youngest of 3 Eternal brothers. His siblings are Ivar, aka Time Walker, and Aram, aka Armstrong. They're all immortal and were born before recorded history, so that's a long time ago. The Eternal Warrior himself is a sworn protector to the Geomancers, who are basically humans who have a special bond with the spirit of the earth itself. When the current Geomancer is accidentally taken out by Obadiah Archer, Gilad is driven by his duty to track down Obadiah and exact revenge. Only problem is, Archer happens to be one half of Archer and Armstrong. Armstrong being Gilad's older brother that we just talked about, who he hasn't spoken to in decades. Armstrong tries to protect his best buddy Archer from his brother, but the relentless Gilad eventually catches up to them, and the duo's only solution now is to find a new Geomancer. Archer and Armstrong eventually track down the new Geomancer, Kay McHenry, who convinces Gilad to not obliterate the duo, which Gilad is more than capable of doing with his thousands of years of fighting experience, his mastery in tactics, and being one of the greatest warriors on Earth. Not to mention his exceptional strength, inhuman durability, and endurance, and the ability to heal from pretty much any wound. And finally, in at number 1, it's Martian Manhunter. Martian Manhunter, aka John Johns, or John Jones on Earth, is the last of his race of Martians, and he is extremely powerful, and should never be slept on, but he usually is. He speaks with the resolve and intelligence of someone who's been around for a very hot minute, and that's because he has been. According to DC, he is in the ballpark of around, or over, 220 million years old. John arrived on Earth after he was pulled there through space and time by a teleportation beam during an experiment conducted by Dr. Saul Erdel, who passed away from the shock of actually finding a Martian shortly after this. But way before that, John's race was practically wiped out a long time ago, leaving him completely alone and isolated. But now, pulled forward in time and finally on Earth with no one to tell him what the hell was going on, he eventually used his shape-shifting abilities to become a detective operating in Middletown, America. For a long time, he mainly operated from the safety of his human persona before he eventually exposed himself to the world, not like that, and became a founding member of the Justice League, and also one of its most powerful and ancient members as well.
And it's Hercules. I think we all know the story of Hercules, whatever version you remember. The Disney animated movie, the DC version, the Roman or the Greek version, it's all generally the same thing. And I mean, even after that, this guy has a rap sheet of like 25 other heroic things he did, just like because he wanted to. A major factor in the well-known tragedies surrounding Hercules is the hatred that the goddess Hera, wife of Zeus, had for him. Because while there were many illegitimate offspring that Zeus, sired, let's say, Hercules was the son of an affair that Zeus had with a mortal woman. And not just any mortal woman, but a mortal that Zeus wanted so badly that he disguised himself as her husband in order to lay with her, and ordered Helios, the god of the sun, to not let the sun rise for 72 hours so that his one last night with her would last. Yeah, so not only is he the bastard of a mortal woman, he's also the product of a forced 3-day night, which I guess doesn't really bother anyone living in like Alaska or Norway, because the whole 6 months of night thing, not anything weird.
Number 9. Odin. Odin ended up joining the Stone Age Avengers sometime after he actually was said to have created the humans on Midgard, which was then known as Asheim. In doing so, he had disappointed his father Bor, who decided to punish Odin by hurting the humans. Now, as someone who often seems pretty detached from human suffering later in his life, it's pretty wild to think that Odin possibly created them and was perhaps one of the first cosmic beings to actually care for them as a superhero. And I know what you're thinking, but Amanda, we all know Odin is super old. Yeah, you know that, but did you know he was this heroic? Because I always find it very surprising myself. Odin ended up returning to Asheim to act as its protector and also to learn how to better control Mjolnir, which was his hammer at the time. He ended up befriending multiple prehistoric superheroes, joining the Avengers of 1 million BCE, and he also ended up developing a deeply romantic relationship with his teammate, the Lady Phoenix. In fact, it was even revealed that the Phoenix was actually the true mother of his son, Thor, because that's what's happening now, so there we go.
In a Blue Beetle. In 1964, during the Silver Age of Comics, Charlton Comics revised the character of Dan Garrett, the original Blue Beetle, for a new Blue Beetle series. Charlton's new Blue Beetle retained the original's name, but no powers or backstory, making him a different character. This Beetle was an archaeologist version of Dan, who obtained a number of superhuman powers including super strength, flight, supervision, ability to generate energy blasts from a mythical scarab that he found during a dig in Egypt, where it had been used to imprison an evil mummified pharaoh, because of course it was, which gave way for the DC Comics version of Jaime Reyes. DC's introduction of Jaime Reyes in 2006 retconned and expanded upon the Blue Beetle mythos, but given that the scarab was found during a dig in Egypt, where it was used as an attempt to overthrow Vandal Savage back in the 26th century BCE. Yeah, that's pretty ancient to me, okay? I mean, the scarab was created by Nabu, for God's sakes.
Number 7. Gaia. Gaia is someone that we perhaps don't think of as being an ancient superhero because, well, we just don't really think of Gaia that much. She hails from Marvel Comics and is the goddess of Earth. Gaia is seen as one of the oldest gods that Marvel has to offer us, being one of their elder gods. In fact, Gaia is kind of one of the only elder gods who could be seen as heroic or good. At least one of I would say she's up there, considering she is one of the few who managed to avoid becoming a demon. She also actively sought out the Demiurge in order to produce offspring that would help to rid the universe of the other elder gods who had been corrupted after they became demonic, giving birth to Atom, who then became the Demigorge, the God Eater. She's probably also one of the oldest heroes mentioned on this list at all, so there's also that. Number 6. Nubia. Nubia is possibly even older than most other Amazons, who are generally known for being old and immortal just standardly. In Infinite Frontier, her story was retconned so that she was no longer a woman held and mistreated against her will for a long time, but a princess reborn in the Well of Souls. Nubia was born from the Well of Souls reincarnated around the same time that Princess Diana was born, and the two grew up often being thought of as sisters. And if you're wondering why I was mentioning that she might be older than some of the other Amazons, that's just because she's reincarnated. So although Nubia in her own form is around the same age as Diana, she also got an old soul, you know what I mean? She would spend many years as the guardian of Doom's doorway, and would act as a loyal supporter to Queen Hippolyta, even when it seemed that she had betrayed her. In fact, Nubia's loyalty to the Amazons in the current continuity has not failed, and she even recently was chosen to be the new queen of the Amazons. And we're not just talking about the Amazons of Themyscira either, but in fact all known Amazons in existence, as there are actually multiple Amazonian tribes in existence throughout the world. Number 5. Lady Phoenix. Well, I did think that Phoenix was a little too on the nose for my part 1 of this list. There were some who actually requested her in the comments, so fair enough. Some people want to know more about her. And since she was featured in our thumbnail / cover photo for that first part of our list, I felt for all you loyal nerds who came to this part 2, I should oblige you and tell you more about Lady Phoenix. Who is the woman we featured on that thumb? She is also a member of the 1 million BCE Avengers, also nicknamed the Stone Age or Prehistoric Avengers. Before she was the host of the Phoenix, she was simply known as Firehair, named after her bright red hair, which left her abandoned by her parents only shortly after she was born into the world. Anyone who their tribe deemed basically different in some way was sacrificed in this manner. This was also to be the fate of Firehair, but she was rescued by wolves, so she ended up being okay. She grew up among her pack, but eventually joined up with the Tribe Without Fear, a group of prehistoric mutants. Her own mutant powers would manifest, and she would eventually lose her tribe and become bonded to the Phoenix Force, Force. Ultimately resisting its dark temptations, she would go on to become one of the founding members of the Stone Age Avengers alongside Odin. While it was suggested that Lady Phoenix was actually the true mother of Thor, we learned in Avengers 1 Million BC issue number 1 from 2022 that her relationship ended with Odin before Thor was born, with Gaia being Thor's natural mother as we knew before, Freya being Thor's adoptive mother, and Lady Phoenix being dubbed kinda like his bonus mother, after she helped Gaia give birth to Thor and saved him from a premature death. And then Gaia was like, you can be mother to Thor too. So we got that all figured out. Sorry what I said on part 1 is not exactly true. Not his mother, well she is his mother, but she's not his only mother. He's got a lot of mothers. Number 4, Artemis. Artemis was also once Wonder Woman, don't you know? Back in the New Earth continuity, she herself is an Amazon, and despite her youthful appearance, like most Amazons, she's pretty old. In fact, in the New Earth continuity, she was also granted eternal youth as the result of a spell that Circe had cast upon her. In the Prime Earth continuity, she is just straight up immortal. She hails from the Bana Migdal, which is a splinter group of Amazons all their own. Like I said, there are many different tribes. Princess Diana of Themyscira and Artemis have often been presented as rivals in the comics, with Artemis often being jealous of Wonder Woman and kind of striving to prove herself superior to Diana. But despite this, she is ultimately a force for good and a hero, though her warrior's heart might be a little harder in comparison maybe to Diana's when it comes to her heroic approach. Number 3, Red Sonja. Red Sonja is an interesting one to think of as old, considering how she is often portrayed in the comics, but like Conan, who I touched on during the part 1 of this list, Sonja herself is also ancient in the sense that she hails from the past, the Hyborian Age. She was a creation of Robert E. Howard's, who initially existed within Marvel, but eventually ended up being moved over to Dynamite when it comes to who owns the right to this fiery, fierce warrior character. The Hyborian Age was actually a pastime in Marvel history, at least that is what we're led to believe based on the fact that both she and Conan hail from the reality of Earth 616. Red Sonja set out on her path to become a fierce fighter at a young age, after she was left orphaned when her family were killed and her people were attacked by a group of mercenaries. Red Sonja hails from Western Hyrcania and often fights to help those who cannot help themselves, even sometimes training those she comes across so that they might actually act as a hero in their own story. She is sometimes also a sword for hire, but generally only takes jobs that kind of fit with her own particular moral code. And she does have a moral code, even though she's a mercenary a lot of the times. Number 2, Shazam. Wait, Billy Batson is super old? No, we aren't talking about Shazam. Not that Shazam. Not the Shazam formerly known as Captain Marvel. We're talking about the Wizard, who gave Billy Batson his powers and who has also been known by the name of Shazam. Initially in the Prime Earth continuity, we were led to believe that the Wizard was simply someone who bestowed powers on Billy, but we'd later learned that he was actually one of the old gods Shazam would actually get his powers from. This truth of the Wizard's, aka Mama Roggan's, aka Shazam's origin would be revealed after Billy Batson was left depowered following the action of Grail, Darkseid's daughter, who basically cut off his access to his powers by untethering the old gods from his magic lightning. While not a direct superhero, the Wizard is a powerful force of good who is even able to help repower Billy from the afterworld in spirit form, finding basically new gods for him to be empowered by. Number 1, Eternal Warrior. Marvel and DC are not the only publishers who have ancient heroes. Even Dynamite, now owning Red Sonja, is not the only publisher with ancient superheroes by any stretch. A lot of people have ancient superheroes. In fact, one publisher that was suggested in the comments that has tons of ancient superheroes is Valiant Comics, so I'm happy to be talking to you about that. Great suggestion. This particular hero from Valiant that we're talking about is Gilad Anipada. Gilad was one of 4 siblings granted immortality. He has used this extended time over his life to train up, becoming a master in many different areas of combat. He acts as a hero in the comics, being tasked with defending the Geomancer of any given generation. Geomancers were kind of born in a line, and they're magical heroes in their own right who were chosen to act on behalf of the Earth as the planet's defender, and who are able to communicate with nature and the Earth. And the Eternal Warrior basically just acts as like their guardian, so heroes protecting heroes.
At number 10 is Tigra, first appearing in her own Marvel comic book called The Cat in 1972. This superhero just doesn't get the spotlight very often. Considering she has been a member of the Avengers in the past, it would only make sense that she might appear more prominently in more recent issues, or even MCU movies. But sadly, her most recent appearance was in a supporting role in Avengers Academy between issues 1 and 39. Tigra's powers began as an experiment by Dr. Joanne Tumalo, who gave her powers attached to her costume, and in this form she was simply known as the Cat, but down the line is when she eventually mutated into Tigra, a human-tiger hybrid, through a mystical ritual. She was then bound to a race of humanoid cat people from the Middle Ages, which she could then transform into on command from her human form, using the cat's head amulet. She's a pretty cool hero, so I wonder why they haven't really brought her back in any big way. Maybe they found her too similar to DC's Catwoman, who knows. Next up at number 9 is Stingray, an oceanographer turned superhero who builds his suit in order to explore the depths of the ocean. He helps construct an underwater city covered by a glass dome which he uses to try and grow food for mankind. He first appears in Tales to Astonish number 95 in June of 1967, so he's just on the cusp of the golden age. Just about. This guy is no doubt an older Marvel creation, and if you haven't heard of him, you may not be alone. Although he has appeared as recently as the Iron Man 2020 event, he still only appears briefly as a side character facing off against Captain Barracuda. But at least the writers of that issue probably had the same thought as me, that he deserves to come around again. Once again, my hunch is that he's just a little too similar to DC's Aquaman, which might keep Marvel from giving him any more spotlight than they already have in more modern issues. Although his buddy Namor the Submariner, looks like a carbon copy of Aquaman. But Namor appeared for the first time in Marvel's first ever comic book, Marvel Comics number 1 in 1939, whereas Aquaman didn't appear until 1941. But I digress. It just seems that DC found a way to occupy the underwater superhero market, which keeps us from seeing more characters like Stingray and even Namor more often. At number 8, we have DC's The Question, or just Question. Like Stingray, this superhero first appeared in 1967, but isn't showcased very much anymore. Usually teaming up with the Blue Beetle, this superhero got his last solo series in 1987, lasting 36 issues. He originally had the secret identity of Vic Sage, but was later reimagined in the 2006-2007 miniseries 52, and his protege, Renee Montoya, takes over the mantle. This character is just a good old-fashioned fighter, only really having abilities in martial arts and I guess sleuthing since he's a journalist by trade, but he's just got such a simple and cool film noir kind of look, and it would be cool to see him in a lead role again. Again though, his abilities and look are strikingly similar to Marvel's Chameleon, so maybe by holding back on popularizing this character too much, they're just avoiding butting heads with their competitors. Once again, it's hard to tell.
Number 7, Cosmic Ghost Rider. Cosmic Ghost Rider is an interesting one. While I initially thought of the prehistoric Ghost Rider Ghost when it came to old Ghost Riders, I realized that despite being from an alternate future, Cosmic Ghost Rider is also ancient. But you know, future ancient. Cosmic Ghost Rider is the spirit of Frank Castle, who ends up becoming the spirit of vengeance after he is killed during Thanos' invasion of Earth. In this version of the story, Thanos succeeds in basically destroying Earth, and by the time Frank returns as Ghost Rider to the planet's surface, it's kinda too late for him to save his friends. He ends up alone on the planet, and after years and years of solitude with no one left to avenge, becomes, well, insane, as I think pretty much almost anyone would. Despite eventually becoming Thanos' herald, CGR is really doing his best to be a good guy. He only ever really even joined up with Thanos because, you know, well, there was no one left and he didn't want to be alone. Before even joining up with Thanos, Cosmic Ghost Rider did attempt to get his revenge on the Mad Titan, teaming up with Galactus, but even Galactus fell in this fight against this alternate King Thanos.
Number 6, Exodus. Grand Duke Benny du Paris was a 12th century nobleman from medieval France. Does that count as ancient? I don't know, anyone who was around then, so I'm taking it and just running with it, okay? Cool. What you gonna do about it? Nothing, because I'm just an image on your screen. As an adult, Bene was a crusader for the Knights Templar sent to Jerusalem during the Crusades, and he even became best friends with Eobar Garrington, the Black Knight of that era. The two had set out on a quest to find the Tower of Power, when his abilities manifested after an encounter with the Phoenix Force, which were then improved further thanks to the mutant apocalypse. But thanks to Big Blue, Exodus was trapped in a tomb until the modern day when he was awoken by Magneto and joined his cause. Exodus is one of the most powerful psionic mutants in existence, with such a pristine use of telekinesis and telepathy that he can even alter electrons and molecules. His power is so strong that Marvel even had to debuff him by making his powers dependent on his or others' level of faith in this mutant, although he still regularly kicks some serious butt.
Number 5, the Old Guard. Can we call the Old Guard heroes? I'm not really 100% sure on that. They're ancient warriors who've been many things over the years. Not all the things they've done were necessarily good, but I would say for the most part, they've tried to stay on the side of good, so I think I'm gonna count them for this list. And that's definitely where they are at when it comes to where we meet them in the modern day. Or at least, you know, the direction they're headed towards, I would say. Initially, the Old Guard were a group of immortal mercenaries led by their oldest member, Andy, aka Andromaca of Scythia, who is thousands of years old. It is in their welcoming of a new member that we get to see some of the good in them, despite them being essentially expensive, deadly, and nearly indestructible guns for hire. Their immortality is as much a mystery to them as it is to readers of the series, seemingly happening to each member miraculously and really without explanation. One minute they were alive, the next dead, and then inexplicably right back to living. In 2020, the Old Guard comics got their first film adaptation through Netflix. As with most Greg Rucka creations, the premise and his approach had me hooked, pretty much.
Number 4, Medieval Spawn. Okay, I'm gonna come right out and say this, I know nothing about Spawn. I did not watch the show, I never read the comics, I really have no right to be standing here in front of you talking about him, but I'm doing it anyways. Don't worry, I'm not actually talking about the Spawn. I'm going to be talking about Medieval Spawn. Naturally, Medieval Spawn was not only a hell spawn, but also a knight living in 16th century England. And if you think about it, knights were almost like medieval superheroes, with tales and stories all their own. Sir John of York fought during a civil war in England, but was released from his service to Henry II after he and 3 others mistook the king's anger for orders and went and took the life of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, once he passed at the hands of his king's bodyguards, he was sent to hell for his crimes, where he made a deal with Malbolgia and returned as a hellspawn. He then went around England committing good deeds in the hopes of redeeming himself, but he continues to survive after being basically bonded to his armor and now possessing anyone who chooses to don his helmet. And I need to start reading Spawn. Right now.
Number 3, Witchblade. While most people think of Sarah Pizzini when they think of the Witchblade, Sarah was not the only one to wield the blade, and was, in fact, by far the first. One of the oldest Witchblade wielders was actually Samantha. Samantha hails from ancient Roman times, though she herself is not Roman, but instead was a native of an old Celtic town that they overtook named Cecilia. At least I think its name was Cecilia. There's also a character in the story with her that's named Cecilia, so that's a little confusing, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. Samantha was enslaved, but would eventually escape and end up running into druids out in the countryside, who believed she was the one who would be destined to save the other Celts from the Romans. She was given the Witchblade and would set out on a mission to destroy all Romans. While a hero ultimately, I would say, at least of her own story, Samantha's tale and alignment is pretty complex, which is often what makes Witchblade hosts like her so interesting.
Number 2, Martian Manhunter. You know, I didn't actually know how old Martian Manhunter is. I knew that he was the last of his race of Martians, and I know that he is extremely powerful and should never be slept on. And I know that he speaks with the resolve and intelligence of someone who has seen some serious shiznit. But when I found out that according to DC, he is in the ballpark of around or over 220 million years old, I gotta say, I took a moment to just digest that. John Johns, or John Jones if you want to be rude and go by his human name, arrived on Earth after he was pulled there by a teleportation beam during an experiment conducted by Dr. Saul Erdel, who brought him through space and time and then passed away from the shock of actually finding a Martian. This is because John's race was practically wiped out a long time ago, leaving him completely alone and isolated. But now on Earth, with no one to tell him what the hell was going on, he eventually used his shapeshifting abilities to become a detective operating in Middletown, America. For a long time, he mainly operated from the safety of his human persona before he eventually exposed himself to the world and became a founding member of the Justice League, and also one of its most powerful members. Just saying.
Number 1, Ghost Rider. Way before Johnny Blaze was even ever born, there was Ghost. Ghost is the original Ghost Rider, or at least believed to be the original Ghost Rider, the initial spirit of vengeance. Retroactively anyways, as he made his first comic book appearance after Johnny Blaze historically, appearing in Marvel Legacy issue number 1 from 2017. So obviously that's pretty recent, but you know, canonically one of the first. Ghost became the first Ghost Rider during the prehistoric era and did so in order to defeat the mysterious Wendigo, who took over his pack, becoming their leader only to eat the pack members save for Ghost. Ghost would stumble upon a snake and speak its real name in order to become Ghost Rider, the spirit of vengeance. He also has a cool mammoth, or he had a cool mammoth, and then he got another mammoth, and I think that mammoth's gone too, but he likes mammoths. He would go on to join up with the Avengers of 1 million BC.